You are listening to 89.5 The Wave, KCFV, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and please stay tuned until noon, which is only a few minutes away, for the news, the weather, and then after a short break, GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. So please stay tuned to 89.5 FM, KCFV. Coming up next, we got Rake It Up by Yo Gotti featuring Nicki Minaj. Please enjoy and stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Currently, it is 82 degrees here on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Jell with your noon news update. In local news, the West Nile virus is turning up in St. Charles County. St. Charles County Division of Environmental Health and Protection says several mosquitoes that were caught in the county last week have tested positive for the virus. And then sometimes something goes stupid. Oops. Ahem. So, again, West Nile virus is turning up in St. Charles County. St. Charles County Division of the Environmental Health and Protection says several mosquitoes that were caught in the county last week have tested positive for the virus. It's first time this year that the virus has been found in the county. Illinois lawmakers are considering a bill that would declare neo-Nazi groups terrorist organizations. State Senator Don Harmon says he introduced the bill following the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend. The Illinois State Senate has already approved the bill. If passed, law enforcement in Illinois would be encouraged to pursue the criminal elements of neo-Nazi groups, quote, in the same manner and with the same fervor used to protect the United States from other manifestations of terrorism. And meanwhile, people are trying to identify those who took part in the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend. A St. Louisan has been identified as one of the people who participated in the Unite the Right rally. Clark Canepa was among those who were caught on camera holding a torch and chanting at the event. Canepa told KMOV-TV that it was a fantastic time. Unfortunately, the left-wing violence wasn't prevented by the police. In national news, the White House is reportedly asking congressional Republicans to back President Trump's controversial comments regarding the violence that took place at a white supremacist rally in Virginia. A White House memo obtained by several news outlets calls on Republicans to say Trump was entirely correct. It came with a list of talking points and says Trump condemned hate groups who are fueled by racism. Which he did. A public memorial is underway for the woman killed by a speeding car at a white supremacist rally. Can you tell what's in the news today? Heather Heyer was killed after the car plowed through a crowd of people protesting the rally Saturday in Virginia. The service is taking place at the Paramount Theater on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. Heyer's family is asking those attending to wear something purple. Meanwhile, Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh is defending the city's decision to remove Confederate statues in the middle of the night to keep the city safe. Today, at a news conference, Pugh said the city charter states if the mayor feels she needs to protect the public, she has the right to keep the community safe. She said she felt the best way to remove the statues was overnight with no fanfare. And the Coast Guard is responding after an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 5 crew members crashed 2 miles off the coast of Oahu. The soldiers were taking part in a training exercise when Wheeler Army Airfield lost communications last night. Officials say debris was spotted shortly after. It's not clear if weather played a part in the crash. And Hurricane Gert is making things dangerous for beachgoers along the U.S. Atlantic coast. Swells from Virginia northward to New England are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip current conditions. This morning, the National Hurricane Center is locating Gert several hundred miles northwest of Bermuda, moving to the northeast with top winds of 90 miles an hour. Forecasters are also watching 3 disturbances in the eastern Atlantic. Moving on to the weather. Today, we've got isolated thunderstorms, a high of 89, a low of 74. Tomorrow, we will have scattered thunderstorms with a high of 89, a low of 68. Friday, partly cloudy, high of 90, low of 70. Saturday, partly cloudy, high of 90, low of 69. Sunday, mostly sunny. High of 93, low of 72. Monday, partly cloudy, high of 92, low of 74. Tuesday, partly cloudy, high of 91, low of 72. And Wednesday, mostly sunny, high of 85, low of 66. So basically, until Wednesday, we got rain today and tomorrow in sort of scattered spurts. And then from Friday to Tuesday, it's a high in the 90s, a low in the 70s. It's going to be partly cloudy until Wednesday, where the high drops to a cool 85, except that isn't cool at all. That concludes our news and weather for the day. Now, we will take a short break, and I encourage you to stay tuned, because after this break, we will be back with GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Until then, though, here is Culprit by Ava. Thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome to GameBabble Live. I'm your host, Jell, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Finally, something a little less heavy than the freaking news. Right? Cripes. Anyway, we like to kick the show off with what games have been released this week, what games are coming out next week, and then what anime are currently in theaters. So, let's kick it off with the PlayStation 4 this week. What has been released: 3D Mini Golf, Agents of Mayhem, which we will talk about in a little bit. Wow, did that game get advertised in a very awkward way. That did not go well. Cities Skylines, PlayStation 4 edition, which I hear is the, successor to SimCity in many ways. Dark Mystery, Defenders of Ekron, Eliosi's Hunt, Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth, Matterfall, Minecraft Story Mode Season 2, Episode 2, Giant Consequences, Nidhogg 2, Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition. Yes, you heard that right. Night Trap is out on PlayStation 4. Talk about that in a minute, too. Observer, Paranormal Activity, The Lost Soul, which I believe is a PlayStation VR game. Sonic Mania, Sudden Strike 4, The Incredible Adventures of Van Helsing 2, Tokyo 42, the console release of Undertale, and Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma, and supposedly day after tomorrow, Rogue Stormer's World to the West and Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma come out. Okay. Rogue Stormers and World to the West have both been delayed multiple times, so don't count on that one. I've read those names 5 times on this show, so maybe they'll be out in 2 days, maybe they won't. Let's see what's on Xbox One this week. Agents of Mayhem, Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth, Minecraft Story Mode Season 2, Episode 2, Giant Consequences, Observers, Sonic Mania, and then 2 days, Rogue Stormers World of the West. Nintendo Switch, what you got for us? Sonic Mania and Troll and I. Thank you so much, Nintendo Switch. Moving on, 3DS, what you got for us? Chicken Wiggle. Okay. I don't know what that is. Sure came out on the 3DS, though. Or comes out tomorrow. Chicken Wiggle will be out tomorrow for the 3DS. Whatever that is. And on the Vita, hey, look at that, it's Undertale. So that's what came out this week. What have we got on the pipeline for next week? Well, let's see. Madden NFL 18 GOAT Edition. I thought that was going to be Game of the Year, but no, that's GOAT. Game of all time? The Escapist 2, Thimbleweed Park, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, which I hear is actually being sold at below full price, so that's interesting. And Wolfenstein the 2-pack, along with F1 2017 a few days later, Madden NFL 18, and Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm Legacy, which I think is a collection of all the Ultimate Ninja Storm games. Anyway, that's cool. What about Xbox One? Xbox One gets Absolute Drift Zen Edition, Battle of the Bulge F1 2017, Madden NFL 18, and Naruto Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Storm Legacy, along with The Escapists, Wolfenstein the 2-Pack, Chromagun, Masquerada, Songs and Shadows, and Bleed. Actually, I think Masquerada, Songs and Shadows might have come out this week for PS4? I know it's coming to PlayStation 4 or is on it. So, don't worry if you wanted that game. Next week for the Nintendo Switch, Minecraft Story Mode, a Telltale game series, The Complete Adventure. Yes, that one got delayed. And Thimbleweed Park. On the 3DS, a bundle for New Super Mario Bros. 2 with the Nintendo 2DS. And nothing really on Vita. So, those are our games this week and next week. How about anime in theaters? Well, Fairy Tail Dragon's Cry is in theaters. You can see it tonight at 7 p.m. at Ronnie's and 7:30 at the Gravois Bluff Theater. And Saturday, it will be at Ronnie's at 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. at the Gravois Bluff Theater. Obviously, you can just kind of Google that online and you'll find all the information you need. But yeah, Fairy Tail Dragon's Cry is in theaters tonight and Saturday. I know it's not continual. Meanwhile, on the 27th and 28th, Laputa Castle in the Sky will be in theaters. On Sunday, it will be in theaters, the 27th, I mean. On the 27th, it will be in pretty much all the theaters, dubbed at 12:55, and then on Monday at 7 p.m., it will be in all the theaters, subbed. It's going to be like a Fathom event thing. So there you go. There's your anime, there's your games. We got stuff to watch. We got stuff to play. Now then, where do we go from here? Because it has, it's a week of essentially 3 major, I can't even call one of them a major release. There's basically 3 releases I'm focusing on this week. Agents of Mayhem, Night Trap 25th Anniversary, and Sonic Mania. Those are all the big games that came out this week, and yeah, I can talk a good bit about all of them because there's stuff to say. But I should mention Mo Gamescom. That was last weekend and was very enjoyable. This was only their 2nd year, and it's already growing pretty quickly because, hey, it's a friggin' video game convention here in St. Louis. So I had a good time. I did some interviews, and we will definitely run some of those. Al Lowe, creator of Leisure Suit Larry in particular, I had a great interview with him. We'll listen to that a little bit later in the program. But yeah, I see a lot of potential for Mo Gamescom in the very near future. I think it's going to continue growing. I think it's going to get bigger. It was small this year, but only kind of small-ish. I really think there's potential for it to grow pretty big, and I look forward to going back next year. That was good for a 2nd year with very minimal advertising. So Mo Gamescom happened, and the Nintendo PlayStation was indeed there. We'll talk about that a little bit too. Let's go with Night Trap. Let's talk about Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition. Yeah, I can't believe that exists either, but it does now with kind of higher video quality. I watched a friend of mine play through it last night. It has a new layout, and the video quality is definitely better. I don't know if they transferred it from the original film or VHS tapes or from the old PC release of the game. But the video does not take up the whole screen. It's still in a little box. They have a new layout for it, which is very nice. It looks very, very nicely cleaned up for what it is. But wow, what a baffling game. Friend of mine, the friend who was streaming it last night, he was watching other people play it, and he kept getting angry because they kept missing the code changes. He's like, why does no one know about the code changes? It's a ridiculous game. So what is Night Trap? Well, Night Trap is a infamous Sega CD game starring Dana Plato of Different Strokes. And, it wound up coming under fire during Senator Joseph Lieberman's big Mortal Kombat Senate hearings. See, way back in the early 90s when Mortal Kombat came out, it blew minds, both in almost every sense of the word, because it was so bloody and violent, and everyone was like, it was shocking, and we didn't have a proper rating system in place for video games. Video games were considered toys, and they were aimed at a younger audience. Now, that's not to say that the industry itself didn't try some things. See, a lot of different companies, they were like, we want people to know our games are bloody and violent, because simultaneously to say, so we don't get in trouble if, so people don't buy it for their little kids. And also, so that way we can advertise it. Like, I remember one of the rating systems someone had in place was this friggin' blood thermometer that showed the violence level in the game. It was as much a form of advertising as it was. Actually, it was more a form of advertising than it was a rating system. That's the funniest thing about it. Because, big bloody video games were really selling in the 90s. Big bloody anything was selling in the 90s. It was the 90s. Our comics were getting bloodier, our movies were getting bloodier, our video games were getting bloodier. It was kind of stupid, and of course none of us really thought anything of it because it all looked like ketchup anyway. Seriously, the old Mortal Kombats just look ridiculous. And that's why we loved them. It was cheesy and dumb, and it was shocking that we were blowing people's heads up, but it wasn't particularly realistic. So, yeah, back then, people were, really up in arms about Mortal Kombat, and good old Senator Joseph Lieberman, who was so infamously associated with the fight against violence in video games that he would actually wind up showing up in a violent video game. The Mortal Kombat-esque game, Eternal Champions. The Sega CD version of Eternal Champions has a hidden character named the Senator, who is based on Joseph Lieberman. And that game has the most violent fatalities, ever. Even compared to, Mortal Kombat 9 and X, Eternal Champions is still up there, and somehow I actually find its fatalities more disturbing because they're 16-bit. It's weird. Look, if you want to be kind of freaked out, look up a video compilation on YouTube of Eternal Champions Sega CD fatalities. Those are some of those honestly make me kind of uncomfortable. That game was effective. But, for some reason, the other game that was brought up was Night Trap, a game no one cared about. Again, it was one of those FMV games with footage of real people running around, starring Dana Plato. And the plot, it's the dumbest plot. Apparently there's this sorority house, and there's a sleepover, and ninja vampires called augurs are trying to sneak into the house, kill the girls, and drain them of all their blood. And you play a security agent for SCAT. Because that's the name of the security organization. It's good. It's good. And there's 8 different hidden cameras placed around the house that you're constantly flipping between. And there's traps set up. So the idea is that you're constantly flipping between these 8 different cameras, these 8 different channels, trying to watch the story unfold, because essentially you have 3 different bad sitcom plots going on simultaneously in 3 different rooms while ninja vampires are stalking around. So the act of playing it is actually like watching someone channel surf and not pay attention to much of anything, because they're looking for the ninja vampires. And then when you find them, you have to activate the traps. And unfortunately, the timing on it seems very finicky. I admit I've never actually played it, and I am considering picking up the 25th Anniversary Edition. But, like, yeah, the timing's kind of finicky, and it's a little funky. It came under fire because, of course, you actually do see the girls get killed. Like, they grab people with these, like, neck braces and suck the blood out of them. Someone gets, like, brutally murdered and hung upside down with blood dripping from them. But, of course, you're not the one doing that. You're trying to prevent that. But sometimes that doesn't actually matter. And there was, like, some mildly raunchy content-ish. Kinda. It's funny that Night Trap is more infamous after that hearing than it was before it. But the funny thing about Night Trap, and the most interesting thing, is that it was not originally made for the Sega CD. It was going to come out on a system called the Control Vision in 1989. The Control Vision was a video game system by Hasbro that would have used VHS tapes. VHS tapes that had multiple strings of videos and, like, some line of code in them as well to, like, make the actual game happen. And yeah, you would be playing the games off a VHS tape and switching between the different streams of video. So, yeah, that is very much why it plays in the weird way it does. More than likely, everything on Control Vision would have played in a very similar manner. But the Control Vision was canceled, and the company that made it, Digital Pictures, they were like, well, now what do we do with all the... Hey, Sega CD will play FMV. You know, that actually segues quite nicely into talking about the Nintendo PlayStation. Because back then, it was funny. We really thought FMV games were the future, and now we look back and go, what were we thinking? You know what? We will actually continue talking about FMV games after the break. But I should mention, before I go, I meant to say this. The 25th Anniversary Edition of Night Trap is a bit buggy. I do expect it will probably be patched, but like it has to be patched. The PC version has like a game-breaking bug. The PS4 version is okay. Like about 2/3 of the way through the game, the PC version just kind of crashes. So yeah, that one needs to be patched. PS4 one can be played all the way through, but sometimes it plays the wrong things and it has some hiccups in it. There's definitely some kinks to iron out in the 25th Anniversary Edition of Night Trap. But I think the retry system is new. I don't know. I think it has been an improved... it looks like it's improved at least. Anyway, I am going to kick y'all back to the music. Coming up next is My Girl by C#. And when we come back, we're going to continue talking FMV games and segue into talking about the Nintendo PlayStation and the CD add-on boom of the 90s in general. And what the heck happened with it. Until then, here's My Girl by C# here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you. That was Nothing Like Home by Matt Jordan here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Before the break, we're talking about Night Trap 25th Anniversary Edition and reminiscing on the 90s and the FMV game boom. It is so easy to look back on that and just wonder, what in the heck were people thinking? There were so many awful FMV games that were made. And if you're unfamiliar, FMV means full motion video. And yeah, they are games made of pre-recorded video footage. Obviously, like, the earliest one of these would be like Dragon's Lair, and that was like animated by Don Bluth, and so it was gorgeous at least. And then you get a bunch of cheesy live action crap. I've been meaning to do a top 10 best of the hand animated FMV games for a while now. I will tell you right now that Battle Heat tops the list, followed by either Thayer's Quest or Brain Dead 13. Those are like the big three for the actual hand-drawn stuff. But yeah, the live-action stuff was always very cheesy, very B-movie, but people were convinced it was the future. And it's actually interesting to know that Night Trap was originally made for a VHS tape-based game system from 1989. But, that got canceled. It winds up on Sega CD. What's actually interesting about all this, though, is, why we thought this. You see, graphics were one of the big talking points in video games. We loved talking about how realistic we could make our graphics. For some reason, that was our mark of quality. Not how well it animated, not the artistic quality of it. No, it was all about how close to realism can we get. And that was one of the things with Mortal Kombat. They used digitized actors, and that did blow our minds. Heck, it's one of the reasons why I still like the way Mortal Kombat 1 looks more than any other Mortal Kombat game. Because later on, the characters started getting so colorful and so tweaked that their sprites got cleaner, but they got more video gamey and less photography. But Mortal Kombat 1, no, those are just actors. Those are just photographs punching one another and ketchup coming out of them. And that was great. And yeah, it blew our minds that we could actually have just photographs of people fighting. So that's why you saw a lot of Mortal Kombat clones trying to do that same thing with their graphics, and also why you would see FMV games. Hey, actually drawing something that looks photorealistic, that's hard. But hiring some actors, putting them in front of a camera, and then compressing the image quality down to complete garbage, much easier to do. Let's do that. And people were so convinced, because it's like, wow, video games can be just like movies. We can use all of our movie studio knowledge to make these games, and so many of them fell apart. One thing that actually intrigued me is that relatively recently, a game called, an unreleased Sega CD game came out, called Bug Blasters The Exterminators. And this blew my mind, because way back when I was a kid, I saw the making of this game. I didn't have a Sega CD, so I didn't know it was never released. And I'm like, wait, that game wasn't released? You see, way back in the 90s, there were 2 TV shows that aired on Sci-Fi Channel, even though they really weren't sci-fi. And they were CNET Central and The Next Level. And EGAD, trying to find anything. Good job on the generic name, guys. I was just Googling to see if I could find the old episode. And unfortunately, The Next Level is such a generic name for a show that it's impossible to find. And I can't remember if it was CNET Central or The Next Level. I'm pretty certain it was The Next Level. Actually had, footage on the set of Bug Blasters The Exterminators. It's a shame I didn't record that, because, I'm sure that would be fascinating for game historians now. Because I remember they showed how they did all the effects in that game, and how the whole thing played out, and now I kind of want to get a copy of it. The game was a kind of, it really wanted to be Ghostbusters. It was a cheap knockoff of Ghostbusters, except with giant mutant bugs instead of ghosts. Which, you might think, well, how is that Ghostbusters? When you see it, you'll see. They're in, the same uniforms, except colored yellow, and they totally have proton packs. That's what I mean. It's Ghostbusters with bugs, but I couldn't believe that the game was never released. And yeah, but that was sort of the thing. It all fell through. And unfortunately, that wound up being what the Sega CD was known for. Which, of course, helps us segue into the Nintendo PlayStation. You might be hearing that name and going, what in the what? See, Nintendo was actually considering having a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo themselves, like the Sega CD or the TurboGrafx CD. They wanted a CD add-on as well, and they made a deal with Sony, and Sony was working on a prototype called the PlayStation, and then Nintendo snubbed them and said, no, we're going with Panasonic instead. And then the whole Panasonic deal fell through because Nintendo was like, maybe the CD thing isn't such a good idea because look at how bad the Sega CD flopped. But Panasonic still, had the rights in their contract to use Nintendo characters, so the CDI comes out. You know what happens next. Hotel Mario, Legend of Zelda, Wand of Gamelon, and Link of the Faces of Evil, and Zelda's Adventure. Yeah. Meanwhile, Sony didn't find out that the deal with Nintendo was broken until, I forget if it was CES or E3. I think it was CES. But either way, it wasn't until a conference where they're like, we're going to show off our Nintendo PlayStation, and then Nintendo's like, so we're partnering with Panasonic. So Sony got mad and made the PlayStation, and the rest is history. Like the actual Sony PlayStation. But, yes, some people actually managed to find the original prototype Nintendo PlayStation in full working order, and there's a lot of things that are very interesting about the Nintendo PlayStation. I highly recommend you look up some pictures of it. Number one, it wasn't an add-on. It was an all-built-together system. You plugged Nintendo cartridges in the top, you popped Super Discs into the front. The other interesting thing is that the logo, the font, it was always, people always called it the Nintendo PlayStation, but no one believed until they saw it that it was actually called the PlayStation. We thought it would be called the Super Nintendo CD. No, it was called the PlayStation. And the PlayStation logo, the font they used, is almost identical to the actual Sony PlayStation. And that's the weirdest of weird things, is the controllers for it, which are just Super Nintendo controllers, but they have Sony PlayStation written on it. Now, if you look closely, you'll notice that the logo is slightly off from the actual Sony PlayStation logo, but it is so close, it's nearly identical. And yes, that was a real system. It was working. There was way too much about it. That would be very, very difficult to hoax. It was very... Because I remember when the first footage of it showed up, everyone was like, that can't be real. That can't be real. They didn't produce an actual PlayStation back then. There's no way. And yeah, now they've just been taking it around the world. And yeah, you look at that up close and personal... That's a real system. That is a real Nintendo PlayStation. And because there's nothing to... Here's the problem. Because this was so, not quite released yet, there's not really any games floating around for it, so someone actually made an indie game for it, which you can play on, PC as well, because it would be pointless to have a game exactly 2 people in the world can play. But someone did actually manage to cobble together a Nintendo PlayStation game so something could be run on the CD-ROM drive. But, yeah, it's a very interesting little chunk of history there. I'd really like to know what games were even planned for it, because actually... Nintendo does a very good job keeping their projects secret, so especially in the 90s when there wasn't as much coverage for video games. So yeah, anything about it is kind of mysterious. From my understanding, Secret of Mana was originally going to be a CD game, a Nintendo PlayStation game, but obviously no copies of that version exist. But that could be blamed for some of Secret of Mana's many strange bugs and hiccups. But it is the kind of thing that gets you wondering. You hear about all this, you wonder, why? Why did everyone think CDs were the future? Because to us here in America, when we think CD-ROM video games from the 90s, we think of all the cheesy FMV games like Night Trap, and that's all we know. However, that wasn't the case. Believe it or not, CD-based consoles, there was one that was successful in Japan, and you're not going to believe this. It was the TurboGrafx. Yeah, that's right. TurboGrafx, complete flop in America. In Japan, TurboGrafx, not that big a deal. It gets a CD add-on. It was the first game system to get a CD add-on. It lasted for more than 10 years thanks to that thing. It began to outdo the NES and was so successful that it even beat both of its own successors. Of course, the TurboGrafx isn't what it was called in Japan. No, in Japan, it's known by a different name. The PC Engine. And if you've ever researched anything about video game history, you've heard the name PC Engine. You know how important that is. And it is so easy to forget that the PC Engine is the TurboGrafx. The way those two consoles are spoken of makes you think they're two different things. It's hard to comprehend. They're literally the same system. TurboGrafx 16 was just the US name for it. In Japan, it was the PC Engine, and it was a huge, huge success. But I think it's time to take a little break, and a little bit of a lengthy break. So, coming up next, I Got It Made by Daluza, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. And when we get back, we will continue talking about the TurboGrafx CD, the PC Engine, and why it was such a big deal and success in Japan, causing everyone else to go, I think we need a CD add-on. And how poorly that went for them. Anyway, here's I Got It Made by Daluza. Please enjoy, and thank you so much. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, and that was Perfect Illusion by Lady Gaga. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Anyway, this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And thanks to the 25th anniversary release of Night Trap and the fact that the Nintendo PlayStation was at the Missouri Gamescom, I've decided to take us all on a trip down memory lane, talking about the proliferation of CD-based add-ons, because of course the Nintendo PlayStation was kind of a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, and it's like, why would you make that when the Sega CD was such a flop, and so was the Turbo CD, or was it? See, we often associate CD-ROM games. We think of the Sega CD. We think of all the crappy FMV games like Night Trap that were released on it. And we wonder why. And we think that was all the point was. But in Japan, it was a different story. The TurboGrafx CD was actually a gigantic, game-changing success in Japan. But that's because the TurboGrafx was a very different system in Japan. There, it was known as the PC Engine, and if you've ever looked up anything about video game history, you've probably heard of it. The PC Engine was designed to compete with the NES, and it came out in Japan in 1987. We wouldn't see it until 1989. But again, 1987 in Japan, TurboGrafx hit. And, you know, that means it came out before the Sega Genesis, or Mega Drive as that was known in Japan. And it was a mild success. It was cool because the system was super small. Seriously, the Japanese TurboGrafx is like less than half the size of the American one. One of those bigger is better, let's make it look big and powerful, but at the same time sleek for the Western audience. But in Japan, space is at a premium, so keeping it small and compact was very beneficial, and the original PC Engine is freaking adorable. It is a surprisingly small system, and the games all came on these cards, which this was not the first time a system was trying to play games off of cards, because the Sega Master System actually did that. There were very few Sega cards released for it, but the TurboGrafx 16, yeah, the games were all on cards, but the thing with it wasn't actually a 16-bit system. It had an 8-bit CPU, in fact, one that was nearly identical in many ways to the NES. But it had a 16-bit graphics card, so graphics chip, rather. So it was kind of an NES with less flicker that could display more colors. It really wasn't that impressive of a system. If you've ever played TurboGrafx, like, games on a card, yeah, they're not bad, but most of them aren't impressive, except the shoot-'em-ups. The shoot-'em-ups on TurboGrafx are what it was legendary for, and going back and playing some of them, especially Soldier Blade, yeah, okay, those are really good shoot-'em-ups that still look amazing and stand the test of time. But aside from that, wasn't that big a deal. Until, 1 year later, in 1988, the CD-ROM expansion came out in Japan. That's right. The TurboGrafx had its CD expansion before the Sega Genesis was even on the market. It was indeed the first system with a CD-ROM expansion. And from my understanding, it was ludicrously expensive, especially when it came to America. But the CD expansion, being the first game console with CD capabilities, was a game changer in Japan. What you need to understand about systems at the time is that a lot of those games, the 8-bit, the 16-bit games, were usually under a megabyte. They were usually measured in kilobytes. We got a few that were 1 or 2, 3, maybe up to 10, 11 megabytes, I think. We didn't really have a lot of storage space on those cartridges. So you get a CD-ROM that can hold hundreds of megabytes, and all of a sudden it's like, there's no space restrictions at all. The possibilities are limitless. There is no way we could possibly fill up an entire CD due to the fact that the games were so much smaller back then. You know, when you're dealing with just a 16-bit color palette and these low-resolution sprites, the code is just much, much, much smaller. So they're like, what do we do with all this space? We can use the CD audio to put real music played by, like, real instruments on here. So you get things like freaking Lords of Thunder, which has some of the most amazing metal music you will ever hear playing in the background of this weird fantasy shoot-'em-up that is a sort of legend in many ways. They realized we could have voice acting on here. We can put in cutscenes, which on the TurboGrafx, there were a few that used FMV, like Gulliver Boy. But in general, like, that was sort of the thing. The TurboGrafx was even less capable of full-motion video than the Sega CD. But you could still do things with the big animated sprites that it would load up that would be difficult to do on cartridge because those big animated sprites take up so much space. But now we got all this space. Let's put all the sprites in there. Now it's just a matter of how much RAM you have. And that's where things really got interesting with the Turbo CD. But getting a little ahead of myself, what this translated to, having all this space to make such big games with big cutscenes, what that boiled down to was that it drastically improved two particular genres: the RPG and the visual novel. Two genres that were not very popular in America. It was still widely believed that JRPGs don't sell in America, and the idea of bringing a visual novel to the States was utterly nuts and unheard of, outside of, like, Snatcher. So, yeah, these were things that appealed very much to a Japanese audience, though. And just having this add-on that gives you all this different RPG and visual novel capabilities with all this voice acting and stuff, boom! It exploded. The PC Engine, the TurboGrafx in Japan with the CD add-on would actually outdo the NES and, as I said, its own successors. You see, a little bit later they released a system called the SuperGrafx, which never came to America. SuperGrafx was actually its Japanese name, which was essentially a TurboGrafx with an even more powerful graphics chip and the same 8-bit CPU meaning it couldn't actually take advantage of its new fancier graphics chip. Only, 8, 12, a really small number of Super Graphics games were ever released. Now, the nice thing is, the Super Graphics can play all the TurboGrafx, or rather PC Engine games, and it's completely compatible with the CD add-on. So it's nice in that respect. But in general, yeah, the graphical upgrade was minor at best, and the price was ludicrous. It was the most pointless thing ever released, especially thanks to the mighty power of the system cards. You see, in order to use that CD-ROM expansion, you had to put in a system card, a BIOS of sorts, that told your system, hey, there's no game in here. If you're looking for the game, go check your expansion port, and a CD-ROM drive will load one up for you. So that was its general purpose, but also, when you're loading games off a CD, they have to load somewhere. On a cartridge, the cartridge kind of literally becomes part of the system, and the loading is near instant. You don't need that much memory in the system because the memory is literally stored on the cartridge. With a CD-ROM drive, though, you need to load that data into memory. And so the system card provided the memory for it to load data into. So a little bit later, they released System Card 2 for Super CD-ROM games that increased the amount of memory. And later, far later down the road, they released the arcade card, which even further boosted memory and actually, increased the RAM and a lot of the graphical capabilities of the system. The 3.0 arcade card games look better than anything the Super Graphics ever did, rendering the entire concept of the Super Graphics utterly pointless. These system card upgrades did everything they needed. I mean, shoot, they were putting Neo Geo games on the PC Engine thanks to the arcade card. That was why it was called the arcade card, because it was mostly for doing ports of Neo Geo games, pretty solid ports of Neo Geo games, on a system that, before all these upgrades, was just an NES with more colors and less flicker. What a change. It's amazing seeing how much the TurboGrafx could grow with all these things, and its capabilities allowed it to last for, about 10 years. I think they finally stopped making games for it in 1996. Hang on, I'm going to look it up, because the last game was Sapphire, if I recall correctly. Let me see. PC Engine Sapphire. Sapphire is infamous because it costs stupid money. Because it was never actually released. Okay, Sapphire was 1995. I'm a little overselling it. But Sapphire was, 8 years. 8 years, which back then, when console generations were only 5 years, lasting 8 years is pretty good. 1995, that's when, the PlayStation came out in 1994 in Japan. 1995 was when the PlayStation and the Saturn were in full swing. The N64 was coming, and there were still games coming out for the TurboGrafx in Japan. It was the end of the year, too. It says December 26th, 1995. But yeah, Sapphire is infamous because it was never actually released in stores, since it was pretty much the last game, and the game was done, but they weren't really going to sell it in stores. From my understanding, it was given out at a video game convention in Japan. So only a couple thousand copies exist, and it is an incredible shoot-'em-up, and it's very impressive. It really pushed the power of the system, did crazy morphing effects and things with polygons. Obviously, it required the arcade card. Thankfully, the TurboGrafx has no region protection, so you can kind of just burn a copy. Also, They released it on PSP as part of the Galaxy Fraulein Una collection in 2008. So there are reasonable means of playing Sapphire, other than just emulating the blasted thing. It was never actually released anyway, but if you want a legit copy, you pick up the Galaxy Fraulein Una collection on PSP, which was really weird. It didn't have Una 3, but it had Sapphire. Just because it has the same artist. I guess it takes place in the same universe or something. I don't know. Point is, it's a very nice shoot-'em-up, and really, fully showcased the power of the system. Now, that was in 1995. But in 1994, there was another successor called the PCFX. Oh, that was a mistake. I have a PCFX, by the way. I love it because it plays Battle Heat. That was a launch title for it. But the PCFX was an attempt to create another successor for the PC Engine. And they really played up the PC effect of it, because it actually looks like a small PC tower, even though most of it is empty, and there's some way you can, hook it up to your PC. It was completely incompatible with all the old games, and the main focus was on picture and video qualities. It couldn't push, a single polygon, and there were very, very few action-oriented games on it. It was pretty much all visual novels, a little bit of porn here and there, but there was very, very little released on it. The most exciting games were, we all come full circle now. The most exciting games on the PCFX were FMV games. I mentioned the best FMV game ever made is Battle Heat. Yeah, that was a PCFX launch title. Battle Heat is a hand-drawn Dragon's Lair style fighting game with art by the Fist of the North Star crew and gorgeous animation. The video quality is spectacular, but at the same time, and it's surprisingly responsive. It's definitely an acquired taste. You're not going to see it at EVO. It had a lot of limitations. You could only pit good guys against bad guys, so you couldn't have two good guys fighting. A lot of limitations due to the nature of the game, only one stage, but it was very impressive. But the funniest thing is that it also showed off the system's greatest weakness. You see, since they were so banking on CDs playing the audio chip for the PCFX is garbage, and since the CD drive in Battle Heat is busy playing the video and the sound effects for the game, it can't play any music alongside it, so they have to use the internal graphics chip. So you have, DVD quality video, movie quality animation, CD quality voices and sound effects, and NES quality music. It is so surreal and kind of beautiful. And yeah, that's the whole reason to own a PCFX. Almost nothing else on the system is worthwhile except Battle Heat. I love my Battle Heat. But yeah, the PCFX came out, and hey, guess what? In case you couldn't tell, it was a flop. Again, Japan only, did not do well. The TurboGrafx, the PC Engine, outlasted the PCFX, its own successor. Because that was the power of putting that CD add-on on there, and the kind of games that it wound up enhancing. There were no other systems doing CD-ROMs at the time. So, of course, Sega jumped on the bandwagon, and the Sega CD actually does increase the capabilities of the Sega Genesis, because it lets it do some Mode 7 style effects. I think it increased the color palette. It certainly let it do polygons. Let us not forget that the system launched with Sylpheed, okay? But yeah, the Sega CD didn't do anywhere near as well as the Turbo CD. Part of that was just because the Sega Genesis was not that popular in Japan. It did okay, but it was actually more popular in America than in Japan. And which was funny, actually, because the general response to the Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, in Japan was, why do I need a new game system? I've already got a Famicom. And yet, people latched on to the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx. I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that with that CD add-on. I don't know. Japan and America are very weird markets. So the Genesis winds up being super successful here in the States. In Japan, it was, it didn't flop, but it was like, it did all right. Once it started getting popular in the States and thus started getting more games, that's when it picked up in Japan. But initially out the gate, the Mega Drive did not do so well in Japan. Or at least that's what I hear. But, again, the TurboGrafx flopped in the States, success in Japan, thanks to the overpriced CD add-on, which I guess wasn't overpriced at the time because it was 1988 and CD add-ons for anything was expensive. It was a weird time. But that was why Sega tried to do the Sega CD. That was why Nintendo was like, we should probably do a Super Nintendo CD. Call up Sony. Let's make a PlayStation. No, wait, look at that. The Sega CD just flopped super hard. Never mind then. And that, my good friends, is the story of why people would consider CD-ROM add-ons, as well as what the heck was the deal with FM games at the time, and the Nintendo PlayStation. Good old video game history, full of twists and turns. I still need to do that episode where I explain why I don't know anything about video games. Because all of this, here's the long and short of it is that there is no reliable source for video game information. It's all hearsay and hearsay of hearsay and friend of a friend of a friend's saying things. And there's no really good way to verify a lot of what I just said other than through personal experience and hearsay. Which, I know, you're like, wait, you just spent how long telling this big, long story? And yet you have difficulty backing up, well, yeah, I can't find any episodes of The Next Level, for starters. It's like, there's certain facts that you know, like, apparently, Bug Blasters The Exterminators was never released, and I saw it on CNET Central. That we've got, the video footage of the Selectavision demos, and, some prototype photos of that, and, the people who made it, who made Night Trap talking about it. But, the sheer fervor that that game companies went through to try to become more like to try to become more like movies and all these FMV games. A lot of it you kind of just infer from what you see, the making ofs, what the environment was like at the time. Because yes, I lived through that. I remember the making ofs and the hype surrounding these kinds of games, even though a lot of people looked at them and sort of went, That's the funny thing with video game history. Anyway, I'm going to kick you back to the music. How about King of the World by Weezer? And when we come back, where do we go from here? Let's talk Sonic Mania when we get back. So, please stay tuned to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. Here's King of the World. That was Distance by Omarion, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for a diverse mind. And this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I'm your host, Jell, and we said that after the break we would talk about Sonic Mania. So, what is Sonic Mania? Well, it is a new Sonic game that is surprisingly downloadable only. It always annoys me when they do this. There is a collector's edition of the game that comes with, a statue and a bunch of other little trinkets, and it costs a pretty hefty amount of money, and it doesn't come with, a physical copy of the game. It's just a download code in a fancy case. Thanks. I did not pick that one up, though. I checked. I was like, can I get a physical copy? No. Oh, just a cheap download? Okay. But yeah, Sonic Mania is basically a classic retro-style Sonic, meant to be like, well, if there was another Sonic on Sega Genesis. And in many ways, it's everything Sonic 4 should have been. To anyone worried about the quality of the game, I can safely say it is phenomenal, thanks in large part to the fact that it's mostly made by Christian Whitehead. Who is Christian Whitehead? Well, he is an Australian programmer who created an engine called the Retro Engine, which he used to make some kind of Sonic fan game called, like, Retro Sonic Nexus or something. And at some point in time, Sega was like, hey, what games would you like us to port to the iPhone? And he was like, I really love Sonic CD. You should release that on the iPhone. And so he actually made a mock-up prototype of a port of Sonic CD for iPhone, and Sega was like, no, send him a cease and desist. And then they looked at it, they're like, actually, this is really good. So they actually hired him to do this. So the iPhone, as well as the Xbox 360, PS3, and all those things, ports of Sonic CD, all the recent Sonic CD ports actually came from this guy, and they're not emulations. You see, what he wanted was, there's always been sort of this controversy when it comes to Sonic CD, because they changed some of the soundtrack for the US release. But it was like good music by a good band, but it's not the music that actually goes with the game, but it is nostalgic to some people. But other people would like the original game soundtrack that was in Japan and Europe. And so people have always wanted just a soundtrack select. Every time there's a port of Sonic CD, it's a question of which soundtrack is it, which it's usually the US soundtrack, and people get pissed off about that. They're like, but I want the Japanese and European soundtrack. And this guy was like, hey, I'd like a Sonic CD that has both the Japanese soundtrack and the American soundtrack. Why not a choice? And also, let's do that higher resolution version of the intro sequence. And, how about we make it run smoother and remove the load times and display it in widescreen? Well, you can't just take an old game and say, hey, be widescreen now. Doesn't work that way. So what he did was he actually took Sonic CD and completely dismantled it and reconstructed the whole thing from the ground up, and did it so well, people don't know it's not the original game. People don't know that it was, like, rebuilt from the ground up until you tell them, and they're like, wow, this is better than emulation. So good, in fact, Sega hired him to do iPhone and Android ports of Sonic 1 and 2 using his Retro Engine that received near universal praise because he recreated the Sonic engine, something even Sega themselves can't do. If you ever saw Sonic Genesis on Game Boy Advance, you know that they absolutely can't. See, that's one of the things we don't think about. Sonic had this very particular physics engine, and Sega probably just programmed it that one time and copy-pasted it into Sonic 1, 2, 3, and CD, and Knuckles. They probably just made the engine once, and then they built the game around that engine. And people grew attached to that particular way that the physics felt. So now everyone's like, oh, wow, I want a classic Sonic game, and Sega tries to make it, and the engine's a little off. It's a little not right. The acceleration's a little wrong. Now, speaking personally, this never bothered me. I actually really, really, really like Sonic Advance. In fact, if you've never played Sonic Advance 1 and 2, I highly, highly recommend it. Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Advance 1 and 2, though, love those games. Freaking love them. And if you haven't played them, I recommend them. But yeah, they feel a little off from classic Sonic, and some people will be very picky about this. So at this point, I'm pretty certain that this Christian Whitehead guy actually knows more about how Sonic works than Sega themselves do. Which sounds ridiculous, but remember, times change, people leave the company. I mean, for crying out loud, Yuji Naka, Yu Suzuki, pretty much a lot of the classic Sega crew no longer work at Sega anyway. And try to get people to exactly recreate the Sonic physics engine requires a level of dedication most sane people don't have. But this guy, he pulled it off, and Sega's like, yeah, sure, you want to do a official Sonic fan game of sorts? That's what Sonic Mania is. It's, hey, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, classic retro-style Sonic. Here's what a sequel to Sonic 3 and Knuckles really would be. It is very much the Sonic 4 that we should have had. The only problem with it, aside from the fact that Knuckles kind of sucks to play as, the only real problem with it is the blend of old and new. Because you actually start out, like, it has retro stages in it. So you start at Green Hill Zone, and then you go to Chemical Plant Zone. And the problem there is, they look the same. They're a little bit too accurate. You play through Green Hill Zone, and aside from the fact that the rings rotate smoother, you can barely tell that it's a new game. It just looks like you're playing Sonic 1. And then you get to Chemical Plant Zone, and it just looks like Sonic 2. It sounds like Sonic 1 and 2 until you get to the second act. That's the way they set it up. First act is, here's the stage just the way you remember it from your childhood. Second act is, now let's put a little spin on it. So for Chemical Plant Zone Act 2, they have this whole, gimmick, because every Sonic stage has to have its token gimmick. And the gimmick for Chemical Plant Zone 2 is that you have these giant syringes that you stand on to inject things into the chemicals, which change their colors, and in turn changes their elasticity. So you take, the blue water, you inject the green into it, it turns green, now it's bouncy Jell-O, and you're bouncing off of all this Jell-O, and you've got these sticky walls that you're jumping between, and it's pretty nuts. And the boss for that stage, I feel bad for anyone who doesn't know what's going on, because, sudden drastic genre changes are kind of a bad idea. But I, of course, loved it. I don't want to spoil it, but the boss for that stage is great. Also, that's one of the other twists. Every stage, every act has a boss. Before, it's okay, Act 1, Act 2, and then Act 3 is super short and has a boss at the end. Now it's no, Act 1 and Act 2 are full-length acts with a boss at the end of each one. Which is pretty surprising to me, personally, because I never thought Sonic bosses were very good, and I'm going to assume that maybe this crew felt the same way. They were Sonic bosses have never really been that good. Let's fix that. Let's show people how good a Sonic boss can be. And they're at the very least creative. But yeah, it's kind of annoying. Because yeah, for the first 4 stages, first 2 zones are just, hey, remember this zone? Remember this zone? It's where's the new stuff? Then you get to zone 3, which is Studiopolis. Giant TV studio. It's their spin on the casino stage. And it's wow! This is new. This is fresh. This is new old Sonic. And then after that, it's back to Flying Battery Zone. It's could you've just done all new stages? That's probably my biggest complaint with it. Otherwise, other than Knuckles. I guess this is the way Knuckles always played. It's been a while, but it's wow, Knuckles has really terrible acceleration that makes him almost impossible to control, and I cannot tell when I can glide in the air, because, certain things, after you bounce off certain things, you can cancel into a glide, and other things you can't cancel into a glide, and it's I can't tell when I can and can't glide, and it's screw Knuckles. That's a shame, because I would rather play as Knuckles than Sonic. But, yeah, no, stick with Sonic the first time until you really get a feel for the game. I have not checked to see, they have Sonic with Tails following behind him, and in fact, later on you unlock the ability to have any character with any other character following behind them, including Knuckles and Knuckles featuring Knuckles. But I haven't tested to see if that supports 2-player, but it probably does. As a random side note, the game supports split screen as well. And some of the other things I like about it is the fact that it sparingly uses polygons, which in a way makes it feel even more retro. The sign at the end of the stage, that's made of low-res polygons. And the bonus stage. Okay, the bonus stage uses a Mode 7 floor, like Sonic CD, but it uses the Sonic R low poly count character models. And I love it. I'm like, okay, that's good. Because back in the day when polygons were hard to produce, you could still get a polygon out of your Sega Genesis. And sometimes companies would just be like, oh, here's like a random polygon cube in the middle of this 2D game just to add a weird flashy effect. And you really feel that with Sonic Mania, that they like get that. Like, I've never seen low poly count objects feel so authentically old. It's very weird. And on top of that, like, at first you think, oh, hey, I know all these sprites. You don't. They did re-sprite all the characters, and they animate extra smoothly. You don't notice it at first, and then you'll just see some animations, you're like, why is this so smooth? And don't forget to wait around on the title screen either, because it actually has a opening animated cutscene that perfectly recreates the style of the Sega CD intro and the old Sonic anime. Sonic the Hedgehog the movie, the one with Metal Sonic and all that in it. Yeah! They managed to reproduce that style perfectly. There's a lot to love about this game. And I think classic Sonic fans have already bought it. That's sort of the thing. It's like, would I recommend it? You already bought it. You just don't, like, pretty much. Because a lot of the hardcore fans have been waiting for this. But if you're, like, sort of oh yeah, I remember Sonic. Yeah, this is the Sonic you remember. It's very nice. Except that it still has all of the hiccups. Geez, I forgot how much I hated Chemical Plant Zone Act 1. Because you still get pinched in the same way by those stupid rotating blocks, of which there's way too many of the stupid rotating blocks. And the flippy things. Either way, I'm glad this game exists, because it provides a delightful polar opposite of the upcoming Sonic Forces, which I actually am excited about because it just looks too cheesy. Oh my god, it's like everything everyone said ruined Sonic but really didn't is coming back with a vengeance. We got all the side characters talking to you on the intercom. You get to make a custom character who's a member of the Sonic Forces. We got a stupidly darkish storyline. We've got all sorts of dumb vocal themes. The edgiest villain in the history of Edge with a theme song that is, oh my god. One of the lyrics to the villain's theme is, oh, how does it go? I was born in this pain, it only hurts if you let it. The edge is too real. Oh, Sonic Forces looks like it's going to be magical. And I know a bunch of people are going to be like, this isn't the Sonic I remember. Well, good, you got Sonic Mania. It's over there. It's fantastic. Y'all will love it. On a personal standpoint, I like Sonic Advance more because I really like Sonic Advance, but amounts of quality to Sonic Mania. This is very much a labor of love made by hardcore fans and given the official thumbs up by Sega. And yeah, it is very nice. And it has the versus mode and a very surprising hidden mode. It looks like it's got some good extras too. It's good times. Anyway, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I think that counts as our top of the hour thing, because it is 2 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. I'm going to take a quick break. You'll have Comeback Kid by the band Perry. And when we come back, I think it'll be time to run those interviews from Mo Gamescom. So, here is Comeback Kid by the band Perry. Please enjoy, and thank you so much for listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. That was Comeback Kid by the band Perry here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. So, this past weekend, we had MoGamesCon, which was small but growing. I mean, this is only their second year, and I predict big things for the future for this con. I'm very excited for MoGamesCon 3. I think there's a lot of potential here. Anyway, while I was there, we did some interviews, the most interesting of which was the one with Al Lowe. So let's just get the best one out of the way right now, because it's kind of just too good. Had a bit of a bumbling start, but Al Lowe is a very fascinating personality, and I learned a lot of things. Because I never looked into Leisure Suit Larry particularly hard, or like the history of pornographic video games particularly hard. And as such, it's softcore porn. But as such, this was very enlightening to me, and Al Lowe is a huge personality. And yeah, he's the creator of the Leisure Suit Larry series. So please enjoy this interview I did. Let me just roll this interview. I think you will find it very enlightening. So yeah, lots of stuff I learned there. I knew nothing about soft porn. I was surprised to find out that they didn't have any trouble getting the game published. And good to know he had nothing to do with box office bust, because that game is terrible. And I know a bunch of people are going to be like, well, I liked Magna Cup. No, don't care if you like the PS2 game. Box office bust was a whole new kind of terror. It's a golf cart driving simulator with really bad graphics. It looks worse than the PS2 game, even though it's on 360. I applaud the fact that they sold it at a budget price, but no price is low enough for that complete mess of a game. I actually had a friend who picked it up because he's like, oh, it's a bad game. Well, I love playing and making fun of bad games. I'm like, no, it's a really bad game. He's like, I'm gonna play it. And then he yelled at me for like years later because the game made him physically ill due to the shade of orange they used. It was a very orange game. And it gave him a minor, like, epileptic episode that he didn't know he had. They just tuned into just the right shade of orange to give him a splitting headache. Which we didn't know that orange existed until Box Office Bust. Box Office Bust is terrible. I can't stress it enough. There's so much wrong with that game. Like, could go on about that. But no, okay, so that was my interview with Al Lowe, creator of Leisure Suit Larry. Good times, great person to hang out with. The other, like, really interesting one, though, is I interviewed Limited Run Games, which, as you can tell, is a company that intrigues me. Even though I haven't bought any of their games, kind of missed out on their releases of Shantae, because I didn't quite have the money at the time, and I was like, well, technically I already have these games, and I don't think they're really, really going to be rare, and I wouldn't have left them in the shrink wrap. I would have cracked those things open. But Limited Run Games is a company that basically whenever there's like a really, really good digital release, and they're like, I bet collectors would like a physical copy of this. Spoilers, I do. They go out of their way to produce physical copies, but only in limited numbers. And I got to talk to them, ask why the numbers are so limited. So here's my interview with Limited Run Games.
For more about MoGameCon, check out www.mogamecon.com and stay tuned to KCFV 89.5 The Wave.
So now we're all full of regret for not pre-ordering Skullgirls. Yeah. I very much like what Limited Run Games does. I don't like the fact that they are such limited runs, but if it's such a small operation, I guess I understand. Good times. Good times. So, those were like probably the two biggest interviews for me. The other one, of course, is actually the interview with one of the guys running MoGamesCon. I was asking, what inspired you to do this, and what's the convention been like for you? So we're gonna hit this one up And then after this, we'll take a short break. Actually, yeah, we'll take a... I don't know. Let's just run the interview.
This is a case.
So there you go. I've got a couple other interviews, and I think we'll see if we've got time to run them a little bit later in the program, because we are coming up on the end, and I do want to talk... You know what, I'll just make it quick. Let's talk about Agents of Mayhem right here, right now. That game really got advertised wrong. Because I remember when Agents of Mayhem was shown at E3. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, it like, when they first showed it at E3, they, of course, just had a pre-rendered CG trailer, absolutely no gameplay footage. And I see it, and everyone's showing off their Overwatch clones. And I see, oh, hey, it's Volition, but we've got all these pre-made characters. I'm like, okay, oh, Volition does Overwatch. That's what everyone said. And that's what everyone thought it was until the game came out, and now reviewers are still referring to it as being Overwatch, like, even though it's not Overwatch. How not Overwatch is it? It's single player. Doesn't even have co-op. There is absolutely, positively no multiplayer in Agents of Mayhem. Well, then what is it? Well, it's Saints Row, kind of. Imagine if you took Saints Row, right? But then you don't, instead of getting a custom character, you choose 3 out of 12 different playable characters with preset loadouts. You dive into the city, and then you, like, drive to a mission point and you do a mission. Okay, that doesn't sound too bad. You're switching between the characters on the fly. Sounds pretty fun. Oh, yeah, except, okay, the custom character was kind of a big deal in Saints Row. As was, goofing around and clothing shopping and, like, doing all these crazy side missions and stuff. And a lot of that's kind of gone. You don't really get to customize your weapon loadout because each character has a preset weapon loadout. You can't dress your character up, really, because they're not a custom character. It's like Saints Row minus all the things that made Saints Row so fun, other than having solid gameplay. And it looks immensely fun. It looks like we've got double jumps and air dashes and super fast-paced, super explodey combat. But I'm looking at it and I'm just going, what's even the point? I'll just play Saints Row 4, or better yet, Saints Row 2. Saints Row 2 does not get nearly as much credit as it deserves. And, it's like, what's even the point of this game? I don't get it, especially because the character designs for it are really, really bad. I don't understand what they were thinking. Like, they're so bland. Like, they just look like random generic customs I could make, and I could make a better custom than these. And that's the problem. That's the thing that goes through my head when I see these characters. If they were gonna do preset characters, they should have gone all in. That's the problem with doing, like, a hero shooter type thing like Overwatch. You need good character designs. Overwatch is successful because the character designs are some of the best we've seen since the 90s. It looks like a 1998 Capcom game in terms of character design, and we love that. Like, those characters would fit in right alongside the Plasma Sword and Rival Schools characters. And that's the thing that makes Overwatch work. You look at Agents of Mayhem, and it's like, wow, everyone just looks normal and generic. Why didn't they have, like, a dragon? And I know you're going to say, wait, what? Why a dragon? Because nothing's off limits now in Saints Row. So put, like, a dragon man dual-wielding shotguns that can fly in there. That's something I couldn't make with the character creator. Put a friggin' cyborg in there, or an alien ant creature, just something I couldn't make with the character creator. Something over the top, something crazy. The game is, like, dwelling on the fact that it is so over the top and crazy, and it's kind of Saints Row G.I. Joe. It's the G.I. Row. And yet, I'm looking at it, and I'm going, you idiots didn't, they just didn't go all in on it. the characters are so bland. Now, I have to admit, I have not played the game yet. Because this is a non-profit show, so I don't really get review copies or anything. And just looking at it, I have no interest in the game. I'll probably try and give it a rent. Maybe I'll talk more in depth about it next week if I manage to grab a rental, but I don't understand the point of this game at all. Yeah. So, I am going to take a short break, got that out of my system, and then we'll be back. I might have a few more things to say about it, but, I don't know. I don't friggin' know. Please enjoy Touch by Little Mix, and then after a short break, we will run a few more interviews from GamesCon and wrap up the show. Thank you so much for listening to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Here's Touch by Little Mix. Hello, you're listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And as it is 2:38, that means we are indeed coming up on the last chunk of the program. Come to think of it, I guess I don't have much more to say about Agents of Mayhem, other than I think the main thing I have to say is I feel bad for Volition, the people who make the Saints Row series, because Volition, they made such an amazing game. They made such an amazing game series. Saints Row is phenomenal. And yet, I don't think they made a lot of money off of it, because when Saints Row was in its prime, their publisher, THQ, was a complete dumpster fire. See, when Saints Row 3 came out, THQ was in the middle of going bankrupt. Saints Row and their wrestling games were the only things making money, and there were a variety of things they did wrong, but the U-Draw tablet was one of the worst. See, they made this little tablet for, drawing on for the Wii, and then they were like, hey, let's put it on PS3 and Xbox 360 as well. And then they commissioned, 12 games for it to be ported to all three systems. And I guess it was mildly successful on the Wii, but yeah, PS3 and Xbox 360 did not see as much success, and that meant they had to develop 3 different, tablet peripherals that they were selling at relatively high prices that could only be used with 12 games that they specifically commissioned just for the stupid tablet that doesn't even work all that well. And the result, I don't think very many of these games were particularly successful. In essence, they had just produced 36 flops in a row. And that kind of helped sink the company. And so I don't think all the funding that, I don't think that Volition Entertainment made all the money they deserved to off of Saints Row 3. And then Saints Row 4 was literally supposed to be DLC for Saints Row 3, but got turned into a full game out of desperation from THQ, and then THQ goes under. And now the Red Faction series, which was also made by Volition, is owned by some other company, and so Volition can't continue the Altor storyline, because Saints Row and Red Faction take place in the same universe. So now they also, I don't think they can re-release anything before Saints Row 4. And, yeah, and now here's the Saints Row no one asked for. It's funny, honestly, Agents of Mayhem kind of just looks like Saints Row 4 as well. It's very awkward. Perhaps next week we'll actually get into detail about the Saints Row series, a little retrospective there. The long and short of it, though, is that Saints Row 2 is the best. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Because that's the thing. A lot of people got into Saints Row with Saints Row 3, and they think, oh, the first 2 games were garbage, and then suddenly it got good. No. Like, Saints Row 3 is way more polished, way better graphics engine, huge graphical overhaul. And Saints Row 1 was, well, a starting point. It was a first-gen Xbox 360 game. But Saints Row 2, though it's fugly, though it's buggy, is so much better than the entire rest of the series. And no, not because it has a darker tone to it. Like, I like the silliness of the future Saints Row games, Saints Row 3 and 4. I like that. Saints Row 2 just gave you a bigger, better designed city with more stores and more side quests and more freedom and, believe it or not, better character customization. Yeah, your character didn't look particularly good. It was very hard to work with that, but like the clothing options were much higher, which I know blows people's minds because people like Saints Row 3 and 4 have some of the best character customization I've ever seen. It was better in 2. Your character won't look as good, but you had way more options, and a lot of that had to do with the clothing, because back then, not only did you have more clothing options, but you could layer the clothes and save different custom outfits, and a lot of that got cut from the game for Saints Row 3 and 4 because people wanted trench coats. Yes, seriously. People asked about this, and they were like, well, one of the most requested things people wanted was big flowy trench coats, and big flowy trench coats clash with the layering system, so we had to remove the layering system. And it's like, well, great, you just, like, removed a hefty chunk of character customization. And again, there were more side missions to do, more hidden things, more freedom, more... Saints Row 2 is so good. Like, I actually think it is the best open-world, like, Grand Theft Auto-style video game ever made. I love Saints Row 2. And we'll talk in more detail about that next week, because hopefully I'll be able to find a copy of Agents of Mayhem to actually play. Until then, though, I think we're going to wrap up the show by playing my last few interviews, of which there are 2. I spoke with Stephen Lucas, the 1991 Nintendo College Challenge champion, which was an obscure NES tournament thing, and he was hanging out at GameCon and felt like talking about his past glory and so on. And then after that, I spoke with the representatives for the Renaissance Fair. And, let's run those interviews and wrap up the show. Thank you so much for listening to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I hope you have enjoyed the show, and I hope to see you again next week, next Wednesday. Although, fair warning, if I'm not mistaken, next week should be when a lot of the students will be coming in to pick the time slots for their radio shows, so I might wind up getting bumped to a different time slot. So, because of that, I will keep you posted either next week or week after next. I'm not sure which. I will let you know if the time slot gets changed or if it remains from noon to 3 p.m. But the only way to find out is to tune in next week from noon to 3 p.m. here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, or to check out the GameBabble YouTube channel. I keep forgetting to plug that, mostly because it's a gigantic embarrassment because I don't update it nearly enough. So, if you would like to, if the time gets changed, I will absolutely post a video to the YouTube channel about the new time. And maybe I'll finally get, like, past episodes up on the internet. I don't know. Someone gave me a suggestion at GameCon about a place to upload these episodes, and I forgot what it was. Dang it. But we got people who might be able to help me with that. So, I will keep you posted as I try to figure out how to get the episodes uploaded. And, it'll all be on the YouTube channel, so please look up GameBabble on YouTube and click the channel, watch the video about Splatoon 2, and probably the upcoming Wizardry 8 stream I'm gonna do. I spent the last week making Wizardry 8 custom portraits and modding them into the game. See, what happened is this game called Grimoire finally came out after 25 years of development. That was originally supposed to be Wizardry 8, but, like, the contract got canceled, and this guy kept working on the game, but making it not Wizardry. And, yeah, that game finally came out, and I looked at it, and I'm like, man, this just makes me want to play Wizardry 8. So I popped that in, and stumbled across the instructions for modding in your own portraits, and I looked at the character portraits, and I'm like, yeah, I might need to do that. And I was going to get, like, someone else to draw them, like, actually well, but I drew a character, and I really liked it, and I shrank it down to the necessary size, which is 90 by 72. Yes, it's an old game. So I shrunk the image down to 90 by 72, and then looked at it, and I was like, you know what? If you shrink my art down that small, it doesn't look quite as crap. So I drew all these character portraits and modded them into the game, which was tricky because they're animated. They're animated character portraits, and I've been meaning to stream that, but I've got some hurdles I've got to jump through before I do that. But I've got a fully custom party ready to roll. Lots of fairies and lizard people. Because the strongest weapon in the game can only be used by a ninja fairy. Seriously. I think it's time to roll some interviews. Anyway, thanks again for listening to GameBabble Live here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Stay tuned next week from noon to 3 p.m. on Wednesday to find out what's going on with the show. Hit up the YouTube channel. And here is my interview with Stephen Lucas, followed by my interview with people from the Renaissance Festival. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the interviews, and then enjoy the music. After that, we've got Life Goes On by Fergie, for better or for worse, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Thank you so much for listening.